What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Winning the Margins. Life has been a little bit hectic since our last episode. As many of you guys may know, I did recently end up moving from San Antonio, Texas to South Korea. Main reason for that was the old Air Force contract that I was working under ended up transferring to a different company. Things just didn't really align with the vision that we had for our life. So ended up looking for some other work. Ended up finding a job out here in South Korea that still keeps me in the cognitive performance space, working with the military as a civilian contractor, but instead of working with instructor pilots and fighter pilots, now I'm going to be working with Army attack helicopter pilots. And honestly, it's been amazing so far. South Korea is amazing. The people here are so nice. Everything is so clean. The food is extremely high quality. The gyms are good. Main bad things, probably just like traffic and how the locals like to drive. They kind of view red lights as more of a suggestion than as an actual rule. So driving on the roads has definitely been something that I've had to acclimate to. But otherwise, man, it's amazing. The mission here is awesome. We're still getting spun up right now, so we're in the early stages of the contract, getting everything spun up, but we have really bright things ahead, and you know, life is good. Really looking forward to Kayla being able to move out here next year once she finishes her PhD. And once she does that and she gets done with graduation and everything, I think things will start to feel a little bit more normal. But that's enough about me. Today we are here to talk about mental performance and how to make sure you guys are still getting value from this channel and being able to apply that moving forward. And so obviously the name of the channel, the name of the show is Winning the Margins, right? And that is the spirit of the show that I've wanted to bring you all is, you know, how do those elite performers, how do they continuously get better, right? Everybody always hears the cliche, like, I'm trying to be 1% better today. I'm trying to be 1% better today. One thing that I have found working with some of the highest performers in the world, whether they're, you know, professional bodybuilders on an Olympia stage or fighter pilots who've flown F-22s and F-16s and F-35s, is that getting 1% better when you're already really, really good is really difficult to do. And so a lot of times at the elite level, they're not trying to find 1%. They're trying to find 0.1% or 0.01%. And that's what the spirit of this show is, winning the margins, right? When we're talking about winning those margins, it's how many of those little things can you stack up day over day consistently that is going to allow you to continue working towards that goal. So one thing that I have found is when we're able to really identify what those margins look like and we can stack them up, you're going to get compound interest over time, whether it's 1%, 0.1%, 0.01%. At the highest level, those are the things that really, really matter. And I was recently listening to a podcast the other day from former F1 world champion Nico Rosberg. And I loved his perspective on what it took to win the world championship back in 2016. So for those of you who aren't super aware, Formula One is a sport that is largely dictated by weight. So when we're talking about weight, we're talking about the weight of the car, the driver, the engine components. Everything is optimized by some of the best engineers in the planet to try to reduce the overall weight, because the less you weigh, the faster you go. Now, the cars have minimum weight requirements, right? And so the drivers have a specific body weight that they walk around at throughout the week, right? They have a specific body weight they like to be at on race day that's going to be able to maximize not only the performance of the car, but the performance of themselves. And so with that being said, teams make it their mission to shave off even half of a pound wherever they can, because that is going to lead to quicker lap times. And to paint you guys a picture, it's 2016 and Nico Rosberg is leading the Drivers' Championship heading into Suzuka, the Japanese Grand Prix, against his teammate Lewis Hamilton. They've been neck and neck all year long. They both drive for Mercedes, so they're technically teammates, but they are still racing against each other. In Formula One, there's two different types of championships. There's the Drivers' Championship, which is awarded to the driver who individually scores the most amount of points on the season. And then there's the Constructors' Championship. So there's now 11 teams in Formula One. So 11 teams, 2 drivers per team, 22 total drivers. At the time here in 2016, I believe there were only 10 teams. So it would have been 10 teams, 20 drivers. And Nico and Lewis were far and above the 2 best drivers on the grid. They were having the best year. They were neck and neck in points, and they had been driving very aggressively, so much so that they had even run each other off the track several times that year. And looking back on it, they ended up calling it the Silver War because Mercedes colors are silver. Nico, Lewis, both driving the Silver Arrows, which is what they call those Mercedes. And it's a slim 23-point lead with 5 races left in the season, so it's still anyone's title. Nico Rosberg is ahead, not by much, and he's trying to figure out, like, how do I find a small margin so I can try to extend my lead to Lewis. It's a 23-point lead. When you win a race, you get 25 points. Second place, 18 points. Third place is 15 points, I believe. So let's just say Nico were to crash out of a race, Lewis wins a race, all of a sudden that 23-point lead is completely erased. So that just goes to show how quickly odds can swing in the favor of another driver. So Nico and his side of the garage on the Mercedes team spent hours in the simulator that week leading up to Suzuka working out their strategy for qualifying. Now, the way that Formula One works is when you get to race week, right? They're gonna go race at Suzuka, the Japanese Grand Prix. Well, they get there and then they have to qualify, and whoever gets the fastest times in qualifying, they end up starting at the front of the grid, which is called pole position. If you qualify with the fastest lap time, you get pole position, which is obviously a huge advantage because you have several feet of an advantage going into the first turn, which obviously you want to be winning the race, right? So what they found out is that during qualifying, or during the week leading up to qualifying, is they spent a ton of time in the simulators trying to figure out, where do we find, a tenth of a second? Where do we find 2/10 of a second? And in racing, a half a second is basically an eternity. So they're trying to build up, a tenth of a second, half a tenth here, half a tenth there. And what they ended up finding out is that they needed to find the smallest margins to secure that pole position. Now, the calculations in the sim showed that if Nico could drop 1 kilogram of weight, it would yield 3/100ths of a second. We're not talking about a tenth of a second anymore. We're talking about 3/100ths of a second. That's faster than you blink your eyes in qualifying. Now, the car itself is over 700 kilograms. Now, when you factor in the drivers weigh probably around 80 kilograms. So you're looking at close to 800 kilograms for the entire car plus driver. So they went to work on dropping the 1 kilogram without sacrificing performance. Now, like I said earlier, Nico has a specific body weight he likes to walk around at, where he's able to perform to the best of his capabilities. Now, you don't want to drop too much body weight because it's going to require dehydration. It's going to require being underfed. And so if you do that, you're not going to be able to have the wherewithal and the cognitive function and the physical capabilities to last through an entire race. Those races are grueling. The drivers lose kilograms of weight throughout a race, especially when it's hot. And so this is where the ingenuity started to happen, and how they got so creative with trying to find margins without sacrificing performance. So Nico had a plain black carbon helmet going into that week. Normally, teams, they paint their helmets, they have designs, they show off their sponsors, and so the helmets are usually very creative, very decorative, which requires them to paint the helmets. And he realized that, I'm trying to drop 1 kilogram, which is 1,000 grams. And he recognized that the paint on the helmet weighed about 80 grams. So they stripped off the paint in order to reduce the weight in an already maximally optimized vehicle and body, right? So 80 grams out of 1 kilogram, that's less than 10% less than 10% of what they're trying to get out. Now, he's still got 920 more grams to go that he's got to figure out a way to get off of the entire rig, so that way he can find those 3/100ths of a second. So next what they did is they cut out the foam out of his seat. Any foam that could be removed without damaging the structural integrity of the car was kept in. The foam that they use is very light, but that is grams of weight off the car that gets him closer to that 1 kilogram total. Lastly, and this is where you start talking about like how do we get everyone involved into this project of getting the 1 kilogram off without sacrificing performance? And Nico's trainer, or his physio who was in charge of how he would work out to stay in shape throughout the season, he had a great idea. And so Nico was an avid cyclist throughout the week to stay in shape to withstand the high Gs, because when you're under G, and this is something that I learned from working with the Air Force and fighter pilots, is that you need to have really strong legs and a really strong core, so that way you can tense your muscles, which is called an AGSM, anti-G straining maneuver, so that way you can keep the blood up in your head. Now, the racers, they're not experiencing Gs typically to the same sustained level as a fighter pilot, but they're still pulling 5 Gs, 6 Gs, sometimes even more than that. And so he obviously needs to stay in shape. Well, when you cycle, obviously you get a quad pump, and the inflammation that lingers from that quad pump sticks to your body as water weight. And so your leg muscles are obviously the biggest muscles in your body. So Nico cut out all of the cycling during the week leading up to qualifying in order to reduce the total amount of inflammation that his body would be holding on to leading into qualifying. So by the time qualifying arrived, he had managed to scrape off 1 kilogram from the 700 plus kilograms between himself and the car. So if we're gonna do some more quick math, 1 divided by 700 is 0.0014. So tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths. So he got 14 10,000ths of total weight off the car, or off of his entire unit. Nico's not finding 1%. He found 15 10,000ths of a percent. So now when we start talking about elite performers trying to win the margins, finding 1% would be far too much. 15 10,000ths of 1%. Now, that ended up proving to be the difference. Nico ended up qualifying on pole position over his teammate Lewis Hamilton by 13 1,000ths of a second. Now remember, I told you getting a kilogram of body weight off of you would result in 3/100ths of a second. He qualified faster by 13 1,000ths of a second. So if he hadn't taken all of those steps, removing the paint, stopping the cycling that week to reduce inflammation, cutting the foam out of his seat, he would not have been able to find that margin and out-qualify his teammate. At their speed, Nico was 82 centimeters faster around the track. 82 centimeters, which is basically nothing when you talk about 100 plus miles per hour in a Formula One car. Now, if we start to think about what the ramifications of that could have been, now let's say Nico didn't qualify pole position. Lewis is on pole position. Now, Lewis gets out to a good start in the race. He ends up controlling the pace. His strategy ends up being good. Lewis wins the race. Nico finishes second. All of a sudden, that's a 7-point difference, which actually turns into almost like a 14-point swing, where if Nico had won, Nico would have extended that 23-point lead by 7 more points. Lewis would have dropped down 7 points. So it would have been a 14-point swing in either direction. Now, Nico ended up winning the championship by 5 points that year. So when we start talking about, again, the ramifications of finding those margins, that is literally the difference between winning and losing. If Nico had not qualified on pole position, who knows how that race goes? Let's say Lewis wins that race, takes the 14-point swing. Now all of a sudden, the end of the season comes, Lewis has won another world championship. And then the way that Lewis's career has now panned out, Lewis has won 7 world championships, which is tied for the most with Michael Schumacher. If he had won that championship, he would be the sole leader in world driver championships with 8. He would be the greatest of all time. But Lewis doesn't have that title right now. People are always going to make an argument. Well, him and Michael are tied at 7. So even Nico just finding 15 ten-thousandths of a percent of body weight or of total weight off of his car on that weekend could have played a massive factor on winning the championship that season. And so it's really important to understand how those margins become multipliers over time. Now, if he does this consistently, who knows how many more points he wins, right? And what the ramifications are on the history of that sport. Now, 0.1% by itself in a vacuum isn't much of anything. But several tenths of a percent every day for weeks, months, or years leads to unrecognizable and undeniable change. One mental exercise that I actually have my clients do within the bodybuilding space that breaks down that percent even more is, let's just say you got off stage and the judge's feedback is you need bigger legs, right? Before you come get on this national stage next year, you need to bring up your legs. So you create a new split. Let's say 2 leg days a week, 5 exercises, and you're doing 2 working sets on each exercises. You're doing the exact same show again next year, so you know I have 52 weeks, and over the course of the week, you're going to have 20 sets that are dedicated to your legs. Now, if you train with suboptimal effort, even 1 rep shy of failure on each set, you are leaving an untold amount of progress on the table. So we're gonna do some quick math here. Like I said, 2 leg days a week, 5 exercises per session. So you're looking at 10 total working sets per session, and you're doing 2 working sets per exercise. So now we're looking at 20 sets per week on your legs. If you leave 1 rep on the table every single set over the course of the year, the math on that is 20 reps per week times 52 weeks, which is 1,040 reps. So when you're walking into the gym and you're not training to the best of your ability, then you start calculating how many reps you left on the table over the course of the year between the time that you got on stage last, between the next time you're going to get on stage. Now, let's be a little less extreme, right? Let's say you nail 16 out of those sets, 16 of those 20 sets every week. Maybe you half-assed, a set of leg extensions, a set of adductors, 1 set of hamstrings, 1 set of Bulgarians, right? But you nailed every single other set for that week. So you're 16 for 20 on the week, every week for a year. You only missed 4 reps across the entire week. You still missed 208 reps across the span of the year. Now that's the equivalent of about 20 sets if you're working in the 10 rep range. 208 reps is not insignificant, especially at the top end of the effort that those reps at the end of a set require. So this is why those tenths of a percent worth of margins make such a huge difference. We all know diet is a huge lever you can pull. Cardio, you guys see the bike here next to me, it's a huge lever that you can pull. Training is one of those levers that's going to make the biggest difference in helping you to craft and create that physique. So the next time you get on stage, you blow that last physique out of the water. And so if you're leaving even 1 rep in the tank over the course of a year, that's a lot of reps. That's a lot of reps. Now, every set matters, every rep matters. Attention and intention to your work make all the difference when you're playing the long game. Now, that's compound interest over 5 to 10 years. When you say you want to be a pro, you better act like it because someone else out there is acting like one. They're not missing. Now, I say that with a sense of seriousness, but that is not to stress you out and encourage you to be a perfectionist, right? Because we also know that having a high level of attention to detail can be a double-edged sword. And if you're not able to manage the perfectionism side of your brain, it can quickly cause more distress than performance. So I'm encouraging you to be someone who tries really hard, someone whose desires, language, and actions are all in alignment. We want everything moving in the same direction. We want everything pointed at whatever that North Star is. And so I actually have this quote written in the front of this notebook, which right here, there are a series of quotes that I have written that I wanted to make sure we're giving the notebook its sense of direction. I wanted to give the notebook its own spirit. And there are a bunch of little isms that I really relate to. And one of the ones that comes to mind with, being a high-level achiever is deadly serious and playfully alive. Now, when you're deadly serious about your work, you don't make excuses, you don't look for shortcuts, and you're very intentional about your process. But you also want to be playfully alive within your process. It shouldn't always feel robotic and monotonous. There are days where it's going to feel monotonous, and that's fine. It shouldn't always feel that way. You should still be having fun. Having fun will get you further than just white knuckle disciplining your way through, a year's long off season or 2 years or whatever it might be. So being serious and being playful and creative with your process are not mutually exclusive. You want to be able to make room for both of them. Now, the playful curiosity of your process will help you hunt new margins, while the seriousness to uphold your standard will keep you married to engaging in that process. And when I think of creativity, I think of Kobe Bryant. And man, the more that I've studied Kobe over the years, because he was one of my idols growing up. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, diehard Laker fan. Kobe was my first true athletic hero. And at first he was like, he's Superman, like he was blessed with this gift. And the more I recognize what he's done, I recognize that his gift was the gift of work ethic and the gift of creativity. And marrying creativity with a high level of work ethic is what yielded his results. So for Kobe, winning at the highest level isn't just about understanding, the triangle offense or the rules of the game, but rather how he can create seemingly inconsequential margins around how those rules are enforced. Now, in the NBA, there are 3 referees assigned to a game on the court. And with that, it is impossible for 3 referees to catch every minor infraction that happens all over the court. People tug on jerseys, people put their feet where they're not supposed to go, guys are interfering with each other, and when that happens on the court, players use that to their advantage to gain those small margins and try to gain that competitive edge. Now, in Kobe's book, Mamba Mentality, he says, "I made a point of reading the referee's handbook. One of the rules I gleaned from it was that each referee has a designated slot where he is supposed to be on the floor. If the ball is in place W, referees X, Y, and Z have an area on the court assigned to them." And the more I think about it, the more I cannot think of anyone else who went so far as to be creative enough to read the referee's rule book to try to find ways to skirt some of the rules of the game. Now, this is where the real genius comes in, because he goes on to say, when they do that, it creates dead zones, areas on the floor where they can't see certain things. I learned where those zones were, and I took advantage of them. I would get away with holds, travels, all sorts of minor violations simply because I took the time to understand the official's limitations. And that blows me away, because the creativity to create just 1 degree of separation is just so revolutionary. Now, we talk about margins, right? And the game of basketball is one of those games that's won in inches, sometimes in centimeters. We've all seen video replays of, someone going up for a layup and they just get it over the fingertip of the defender and the ball ends up falling in to beat the buzzer and win the game. You've also seen it the other way, where the defender jumps up and he just gets barely the tip of that middle finger on the ball and is able to redirect it enough to make the player miss that shot. Now, Something as simple as an extra bump to create some separation on the perimeter, or locking a defender's arm in the post, can make all the difference between a crucial basket or getting to the foul line. Because if you can get a half an extra step just because you were able to bump someone with your elbow and just slightly throw their weight off, that might be the difference between them not being able to chase you down as you're getting around a screen. And again, those points add up over the course of a game. Yeah, the games are going to be, 100 points, 110 points, but that layup might have been the difference between how a team has to defend you in the last 30 seconds of the game. Now, imagine the intangible effects it also has on the competition as well. If you're going against Kobe and he's winning those small battles in the dead zones, right? He's consistently having these minor infractions. He's shoving an elbow into your ribs. He's bumping you with his hip. He's creating separation. And those would sometimes be called fouls by the officials, but the officials don't see them because he's committing them in those dead zones. There's a good chance you're going to start getting frustrated. You're going to start getting overwhelmed. You're going to start overthinking. And if you can get the opposition to overthink, you're going to win in the time and in the space where you act and they have to react. And what ends up happening is when they're overthinking, they're trying to calculate. And there's a really great line from the book that I'm reading right now, The Inner Game of Tennis, and the author of it says, calculation is miscalculation. The amount of time that you spend trying to calculate something takes away from your ability to have an instinctual response. So the less that they're playing on instinct, the more they have to process, the easier it is to create those small competitive advantages. There's a reason why bodybuilders cheat up on the line towards the judges, right? When they're on stage, they want to close that space. They want to appear larger. They want that silhouette to really be pronounced, right? And so everyone watching this is probably leaving some margins on the table. If you're watching this video, you probably have somewhere in your life where you could be 0.1% better. Again, this is not an encouragement to become a perfectionist. That's not my goal with sharing this. But my goal is to get you to, somewhat audit your life and see, could I be getting an extra 30 minutes of sleep every night rather than scrolling on my phone? I'm guilty of it, right? Could I be putting in a little bit more effort in my cardio, right? Could I be better about packing my meals and making sure my meals are getting eaten on time so that way they actually support and fuel my training? All of those small margins add up over a long period of time. But that doesn't mean that I want you all over-optimizing every single part of your life either. I saw a video with Chris Williamson the other day, the host of the Modern Wisdom podcast, and he's talking about one of his friends who was in kind of like an over-optimization phase of his life where, I believe he said he was like a runner or like a triathlon guy or something like that. And he had this like 2-hour nighttime routine that he had to engage in, and he had to do it perfectly. He's got the blue light blocking glasses. He's got the red light. He's got, specific type of music he listens to, and if any one variable gets thrown off, it completely throws off his ability to then get the rest and recovery. And so Chris ends up telling a story where his friend was downstairs in the bathroom, he's brushing his teeth, and he was pretty much done with that 2-hour nighttime routine. And apparently his girlfriend or his fiance walks into the bathroom while he's brushing his teeth, and she flicks on the light. Now he'd had all the lights off for 2 hours pretty much at this point. So she flicks on the light, and obviously he has that response. And it ends up throwing off his entire night. He wasn't able to sleep that night. Now for her, he goes on to explain, he was like, man, she was just doom scrolling on TikTok, right? 5 minutes ago. And all of a sudden she's done with everything. She goes into bed and boom, right to sleep. So there is a double-edged sword to over-optimizing things. And that's where we get into this phrase of majoring in the minors, right? You don't need to over-analyze every single small detail, especially if it's going to be something that's going to cause more stress than it is progress. So, like I said, I encourage you to audit the ecosystem of your life and be honest about how you can hunt down those winnable margins in your daily life. Start something small, right? If you're someone who likes to doom scroll before bed, put a 15-minute timer on it. instead of letting it go for 30 or 45 minutes, and just see how that adds to your days over time. It may be sleep, might be your morning routine, training, being a better partner, a better friend, a better coworker, etc. It's not limited to just, bodybuilding or whatever endeavor that you are in. And like I said, don't use this as an excuse to fuel your perfectionism. Use it as an exploratory exercise to be relentless about hunting progress to close that gap between who you are now and who you're trying to become. Thank you guys for tuning in. Keep up the good work and keep winning the margins.